I think I gave the topic away. I have been listening to a podcast on cities in the Bible. However, I was a little bit naive that I thought there were 8 episodes to this podcast and that they would pretty well be through it. That is not true. There's going to be several more. They're not done. It's still ongoing, as it were. So we're going to start today in the beginning, and the beginning is in Genesis. So we will, that's where the first city comes up in chapter 4. But a little bit maybe of just thought. What's the difference between a town and a city?
It depends, I think, of where you're at, but one of the things is population.
Yeah, I couldn't find like a hard set rule, but population is definitely
and I think
into
it's the state may have different criteria.
I didn't come across that, but I can believe it.
Yeah, because same thing, what's the difference between a village, a town, and a city?
Or a borough, or a burg, or a,
And down in Louisiana, they're parishes.
Yeah.
I think that goes by the state. whether
Yeah.
it's village or town. or
Yeah, I
city.
think the state does
So,
that.
Because
But-
Ontario was the village of Ontario for a long time until they exploded.
No, it's a city?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, so what do you think would be the, population-wise, the top 10 biggest cities in the world?
Oh, millions.
Give me a name.
Tokyo.
Tokyo?
I thought Japan on that.
See, I know,
Yeah.
Tokyo,
30 or
he did get that.
So I bet you one's in Japan, I bet you a couple are in China, some are India, and maybe
Maybe.
Mexico City.
Yeah, Mexico City.
Beijing, so I know a couple in China. Beijing, I couldn't say anything other
Well,
than
number
Beijing.
one is 37 million. And I also think some cities have moved up and down on this list, like Mexico City, they did something down there that the city is not as big and encompasses some of the outlying areas that it used to. And it made the population shrink, because I think it used to be the biggest city in the world.
That's what I thought.
But it's not anymore, and it has something to do with where, like, the boundaries got redrawn of what is actually Mexico City and then what is surrounding cities. But the biggest in the world currently, it's on the internet, this has to be true,
Absolutely.
is 37,194,000 people, and we're rounding this up or down, we're rounding this off, and it is Tokyo. How many of the 10 biggest cities do you think are in America?
None.
None. That's absolutely correct. None. I didn't know if we would make the list or not, but the smallest of the top 10 is 19 million. And that's 11 million more than America's biggest city. So it's more than double the size.
And what is America, New York or what?
Currently it's New York. I know for a while New York and LA went back and forth, but I think New York has 8 million people in it. It always makes me think of that Crocodile Dundee movie.
Yeah.
8 million people, all of them wanting to live together. Must be the friendliest place in the world.
Been there, done that, not as familiar.
But yes, many of these, so it's Japan, Delhi, India, Shanghai, China, Dhaka, Bangladesh is number 4, St. Paulo in Brazil, which is bigger than Rio. And everybody thinks Rio when they think of Brazil, but Rio isn't even on the list of the top 10. It is a large city, but Sao Paulo is much bigger. Mexico City comes in at number 6. Cairo, Egypt, that shocked me. I would have never, I didn't see that coming. 22 million people live there. Bigger than Beijing.
Really?
Yeah, again, I didn't see that coming. Mumbai, India, and Osaka, Japan. So 2 of them, the number 1 and number 10, are both in Japan, which I don't think is a big shock to anybody that they could be there. Small country, large population for its size, but there were a couple that Bangladesh would have never came to my mind, or Cairo would have never came to my mind. 2 of them also are in India, number 2 and number 9, which, again, that isn't a shock either. India and Japan, you thought would, or India and China would have a couple on the top 10. So the cities in the Bible are nothing like that. Okay, they're not nearly that big. There were some big cities that they talked about in the Bible, but they don't come close to the scale of what we talk about today, as far as the size of the city and the numbers and obviously the buildings and things like that. But, so chapter 4 in Genesis, if we'll start with Bob, I guess, and if you would read verses 11 through 17.
And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. How far did you say?
Through 17.
Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. And he said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot. So this is the first time in the Bible that we hear about a city. The story doesn't begin in a city, it begins in a garden, which was the ideal setting. I don't know how much we can get lost into a garden being the ideal setting. It was the ideal setting because God was there. That's what made it the ideal setting. And that's where God and man occupied the same space. So, but that's where it starts. It starts in a garden, and we get to chapter 4, and we're going to hear about a city. And I mean, we all know the story of Cain pretty good, and it's easy to get lost in the details. But in verse 12, okay, sentence is passed on Cain. God tells him that these are the things, this is the consequences of what you just did. And you're not going to have a good time growing stuff. You're going to be a fugitive. I think we all get that. What's a vagabond? I had to look it up.
Like a,
I think I've heard it in a movie or two over the years.
well, it's hard to describe. It's like itinerant bum or
Yeah,
whatever.
it is. It's somebody that they wander.
Yeah,
They're not going to have a home.
right.
They're going to have to just keep wandering. And it's interesting because Cain obviously wants to defy his punishment or his lot in life, because what does he do?
Built a city.
Yeah, is the city moving around?
No.
No, it's going to stay right there. He's also very afraid that, look, at this point, everybody's related. There's going to be a cousin, there's going to be somebody that's going to want to come and kill him. That was my favorite uncle, that was whatever. That was my dad. He says, everybody's going to want to kill me everywhere I go. And the Lord put a mark upon him. And I've often wondered what that mark, it's this kind of it's not really a great deal of importance. But there was something about Cain that there was a mark on him that if you seen him, you knew not to touch him. And God somehow made it known, you harm Cain, you kill Cain, the vengeance you enact on him is going to be visited to you sevenfold. That's probably not a very good picture. But Cain, when we look at, so verse 15, there's a symbol on him, but Cain decides to build a city. Why? He was just told he's going to be wandering, that he's not going to have a permanent home, but he decides to build a city. What's he want the city for?
Refuge.
For what?
Refuge.
Okay,
Anything else?
protection,
Yeah, place to fill. Cities have what?
walls.
They do. Cities have walls. Cities, there's other people around. It's a larger group. It's pretty easy when you see somebody, one or two or three people out by themselves, to think you're going to rob them or enact some type of crime, I guess. But in a city, there's a lot of people. It can be harder to get away with stuff. It's usually fortified. And he went and built a city. For all outward appearances, Cain looked at the deliverance God gave him, that nobody's going to touch you because I put a mark on you, and I put a fearful punishment on anybody that would. But he still seems to want some of his own deliverance. He doesn't want to wander. He doesn't like the consequences of what he did. I don't think it's about he dislikes having neighbors or anything like that. But he names a city after his firstborn son. And after that, we get a short genealogy, and Cain kind of disappears from the picture. We don't really hear any more about him. We can see the genealogy, though, in verses 18 and 19, if Camden, you would.
And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methuselah. And Methuselah begat Lamech, and Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah.
That was kind of mean. Sorry about that. There was a lot of names in there. I should have threw that.
You don't have a pronunciation.
You know, look, and something I always told when I used to teach teens years ago, and something I always told them: say it like you know what you're talking about, because nobody else at the table knows either.
Yeah.
So just whatever it is, spit it out there, and everybody will think they've been pronouncing it wrong for 20 years. Yeah, just throw it out, because nobody else knows either. So it surprised me a little bit to, there are some things that were accomplished by these relatives, and this comes from the city, his descendants. So he builds a city, his descendants are living there, and we hear that one of them was the fathers of herdsmen, one of them of people, music, harps and organ, metallurgy came from there, bronze and iron came from his descendants. So there was a lot of, there are things that happen in a city, because cities in the Old Testament can kind of, they, for good reason, get a negative vibe, especially the ones we're going to look at this morning. And there are good things that come out of a city as well. You know, there's times where you can accomplish something simply by watching somebody else fail at it 2 or 3 times, and you think, you know, man, maybe if they'd have did that. Or, you know, you get to talking with somebody, you bounce ideas back and forth, you got neighbors. Good things can come out of being in close proximity to others when learning certain things. But as we look at cities, and we can look at cities in the Bible, why do we want to build cities? Why do people want to live in a city? And this is an odd question maybe to ask, considering where we're at. But what makes living in town back then or now attractive?
Well, if you think about it, in town is where the doctors are, which the stores are.
Emergency services are nearby that offer some form of care, some form of protection. That's a very good answer.
Conveniences.
There are conveniences. It's not just those things. There is commerce nearby. So the emergency services definitely today in America help keep us safe. You know, we think about that. I mean, your homeowner's insurance in town is a lot cheaper than what I pay out in the country, because the odds of the fire department getting there before your house is totally destroyed are much higher. There's usually people around the clock at the firehouse. Where I'm at, people got to drive 10 miles to get there, and then drive another 10 miles to get to your house, and by that point, yeah, there might not be a whole lot left, unfortunately, you know. But there are, there's a lot of things about commerce and trade. Then there's things that keep us safe. A lot of people find peace in that. Back then especially, There was security. It was a dangerous world out there. We're, I think, a little ignorant of that in America, but if you go to other countries, what we want to call third world, where they don't have as tight of law and order, living in a city can have definite things there. But there is a fundamental concept of the city and the culture in the Bible. They had fortified walls. They were enclosed completely. They had gates that shut up at night, and they were meant to keep you safe from all the people outside those walls that wanted to come in and kill you or take your stuff, so to speak. And there are a lot of ways too, when people start telling other people they're not safe, they have to have fortified cities, or, you know, who are they keeping us safe from? And there are a lot of, as I was reading through this and listening to these podcasts, there is a lot of correlation to this in America today. Because there is all over the news every day, someone is threatening you. No matter what your point of view is, no matter what you believe in, the other side is coming to get you. And they want to keep people scared, so they turn back on the news to hear more news, to hear what's going on about the people that are going to come and get me. And we might not be building a wall around Hayesville, but in different ways we react to all of these things, from who we vote for to laws that we want to see passed. But you need to be somewhat leery of the person telling you that you need to be afraid. There are some things we should be afraid of, but there are a lot of things we shouldn't be afraid of that society seems to want to keep us afraid of. But have any of you guys ever been to a part of the world where all homes have like a compound, where they're in a fenced-in area?
Peru was.
Peru was like that? Josh, you've been somewhere like that?
I actually lived out in East Germany,
Okay.
and out in the country where all the farmers are. They put walls up instead of fences. Keeps unwanted people out.
Yeah, but a lot of, especially in the what they want to call Latin American culture, all the houses have a compound. Where Rebecca's living in Washington and Oregon, all the houses have a fence, a wall, something. I mean, everybody. And quite honestly, it has a lot to do with property rights, because if you have a home and you don't have a fence, and you come home and there's a homeless encampment in your front yard, there's nothing you can do about it. They have the right to be there. And you can't, now if you have a fence, it's different, but the personal property rights are a big deal, and everybody out there has a fence.
Where is that?
At Washington or Oregon.
Oh.
When it's amazing, all the church he goes to has 5 or 6 acres, and there's a wall around the whole thing. Chain link fence. The only people that seem to be able to escort unwanted out is the military. If you go on a military base and try to set up a homeless encampment, you will be, if you cut the fence and get in or whatever, they're not going to let you stay there. But everybody else, it doesn't seem like, but it's just interesting. So it still is in other cultures, it's just not here. Actually, one of the guys from the podcast moved to Wisconsin for a while. And he said, I moved to Wisconsin and we rented this house, and you walk out in the backyard, there's no fences, and your neighbors came over and you had cookouts together and your kids played together right there in the backyard. It was like a little community area. I thought it was really strange, but it was nice. But that concept, when he moved there, he said it took him like 2 years to get used to this concept that you didn't have a fence around your property. It was new to him, and he kind of liked it. But cities, as we're looking at them here, were introduced as a sad result of humans being exiled from Eden. Their nature becomes violent. So you need cities and walls for protection. And these things in the Old Testament are a symptom of that things are not good outside of Eden, because you can't trust each other. You might have a different idea than I do. Your knowledge in good and bad might not be the same as mine. Not that we see that today. And you know, somebody's going to beat you up and take your stuff, so to speak. You've got to worry about the next bigger town with bigger walls that's going to come over to your smaller town. And cities also in this time, there wasn't obviously nearly as many people like we have in cities today. I don't have, there seemed to be lots of speculation about how many people lived in Nineveh or how many people lived in Babylon or Babel at the time, but I don't know how they would come up with any really truly accurate numbers. There's some speculation by ruins of what the sizes of some of these cities were, but they seem to have been, there was a city that was walled, and it was heavily fortified. And then there would be surrounding villages around the city, and there would be farms. The surrounding villages were called daughters. Cities seem to always be referred to in a feminine context in the Bible. Some languages are like that everything is either masculine or feminine. I know Spanish is one, it's gender-based. There's several that are, French is like that. I don't know if Hebrew, is it like that? I don't know that it is, but the cities definitely seem to be referred to in this manner. But the daughters were looked over, and the idea of it was if an army came, all the surrounding farms and villages all ran inside the city with the big walls, and that's where all the food came from to feed the people in the city, was the people that grazed flocks around the city. They provided that stuff for the people that lived in town. So another just a thought as we think about it started in a garden. What do you find today in virtually every city in the world?
Grocery store.
I'm thinking garden. You know, we started in a garden, was the ideal place, but every city in the world has a park.
Park.
They have a garden, they have an outdoor space, and you're supposed to feel safe there. You're supposed to be able to relax there and find peace there. And to me, that's a little bit interesting. That's where it all started. And we seem to want to carve out that niche in every city around the world where people gather in large quantities to have a place to relax. So we're going to jump ahead now to chapter 10. Yeah, we're making a big jump because we're obviously any cities that were built before this event no longer existed, and that would be the flood. So we're going to jump to chapter 10 in Genesis and start looking at things now. We start off at chapter 10. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were born sons after the flood. That's how chapter 10 starts. Yes, okay, making sure I had that. Well, I forgot to number the verse, so I wanted to make sure that was verse 1. Larry, would you read verses 8 through 12, please?
And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asshur, and built Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah, and Resen between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city.
Okay, so he suffered through a few names, didn't have it quite as bad as, but anyway. So one of the things here, so we get introduced to some of the descendants, and one of them is Nimrod, the mighty hunter. Nimrod, in many cultures, that name was known as a hunter. Today, in our age, well, most of our age group, we can think of a Nimrod as kind of being a buffoon.
Yeah.
You know why that is?
No.
Bugs Bunny changed American culture. Because when Elmer Fudd came around to try to shoot him, he said it sarcastically. Hey, you Nimrod.
Hunter.
and he was a hunter. But the way Bugs Bunny said it changed American culture, changed the meaning of that word in American culture.
Good old Bugs.
Not that that was a popular, and you know, because I wondered, how do we get from hunter to a buffoon? And and again, I got this off the internet, so I believe it to be true. But it does make sense.
Yeah.
Because I can just picture him saying that in multiple cartoons, and probably people didn't know what Nimrod meant. And yeah. I wonder how many hits we'd get if we did a video like that on YouTube.
Put bugs on there.
You know, that might be some copyright stuff. But anyway, so there are two of the cities listed here ended up becoming quite famous. A couple of the others, I'm going to say most of us never heard of, or maybe none of us. I know I hadn't. And the first one was Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital, was the Assyrian Empire, the capital of that. And who got sent there?
Jonah.
Jonah did. And Jonah, the issue with Jonah was hate. Jonah hated these people with a passion. And there was a reason for that. We're not going to go down that rabbit trail today, but there was a reason that Jonah did not want, he wanted God to destroy Nineveh. He did not want them to repent. He didn't want to go because he was afraid that they would repent, and he knew God would forgive them if they did. They were not a nice city, I guess, would be the idea behind that. The other is Babel, which is later called Babylon, which means, anybody?
Speech. Talk.
The gate of God.
Confusion.
So in different languages, yes, in different languages, I need to get to that, it had some different meanings. In Hebrew, they would call it confusion because of the Tower of Babel. But to the people that built the city,
Yes.
they called it the gate of the gods. It was a great city of the day. It was a virtual powerhouse to everyone around them. It is said to have been 42 square miles with the surrounding land. And there was a wall around it, a rampart they're calling it, which was 300 feet high and 75 foot in broad. It also had moats. It was a very well fortified city. They're getting that from excavations they're doing. Now, to be the gate of God, there was a temple. Anybody know who they worshiped there? Because I've heard of this guy before. Marduk.
Oh.
And it is said that they had a golden statue that ancient writers say was 40 feet high of Marduk in the inner court of their temple. These guys were pretty seriously into this guy. He has his own creation story, by the way, which is interesting. But and Babylon was also known to have one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, which was the gardens. Yeah, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are considered to be one of the 7 ancient wonders of the ancient world. I read what they all were, and I can't say there was a lighthouse somewhere in the Colosseum at Rome and something in Greece. I think a statue. But to move on now, I'll break up the next two, maybe flip over to Genesis chapter 11. We're going to look at the issue of the tower. And somebody read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 11, and maybe Bob, and then Jordan 6 through 9. Chapter 11.
Starting and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. How much, pardon?
Go ahead and read 8 and 9, and I'll let Jared get the next one.
So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth.
I've always found the end of verse 9 very interesting. Not only did he change their language, but he scattered them. And it just seemed here, this tale, this event that happened here, shouldn't use the word tale, all started with one said to another. And then you start seeing how many times do you see, let us make brick, let us build, let us make us a name. These guys had a desire to become great, perhaps equal with God. I don't know that it was the fact. I don't believe it was that they wanted to build a city. I think it was why they wanted to do it and what their end goal was. And that was the problem. And they got confounded and they went. It just seems like something happens in a city when you get a bunch of people together. Ideas, both good and bad, start going back and forth. I mean, earlier we seen that metallurgy came around and music, and I'm sure some of these things probably flourished there as well, but their overall goal seemed to go in a direction that God was not happy with. And he confounded them and he scattered them. And we are going to jump ahead now to chapter 18. And this is when the angels come to Abraham and they start talking to him about what's going to happen. And who was next? Jared? Jared. 16 through 18, and then Josh, if you would read 19 through 22.
When the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. When the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham? What am I about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him.
For I have chosen him. 19 to what?
22, please.
For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me, and if not, I will know. So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord.
So the cry of Sodom, it says, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah came up before God. This cry that was coming up was very much connected to the cry of Abel's blood. There are some things that are done that approach God. And God was not happy with it. This Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't like, I live in a bad neighborhood, I'm on the wrong side of the tracks, I'm at the south end of town. It's not, I need to move to the suburb. These towns were wicked. And one thing I think it's worth noting in both places, with both Babel and in Sodom and Gomorrah, God went down to see for himself. I've heard the cries. I know what's going on, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to see it. Because a pretty significant judgment was about to be passed. And significant enough that, in my mind, God wanted to go see it himself. It wasn't something, he wanted to go see it. I don't know how to correlate that with a omnipresent being, but it's very clear that God said, I am going there and I'm going to go see it.
Well, it goes back to the garden. Adam and Eve sinned. God came walking.
Yes.
And it's also interesting, especially in Babel, they wanted to build it up to reach God. And in that story and in this one, you find God still having to come down.
Yes.
And so man tries to get there. He will never, he's trying to get to God, and God is telling us in plain words, I always will have to come down to you.
Yeah, they weren't making it up.
They were not making it up.
Yeah. Any thoughts about anything so far? I want to take a look at Lot next in chapter 19.
I think it's interesting that they brought up in the podcast, Adam, dirt, and blood are all the same variations of the same Hebrew word. Adam, Adamah, and which is dirt, and then blood is Adamah something. So from the dirt, God made Adam, and when it came to Abel, Cain slew the man, and his blood went back to the earth where he had come from, and it cried out to God. There's a play on words, but Adam, Adamah, and blood are all the same Hebrew root word that he played on. And also I thought it was interesting, when God made Eve, he built her, is the Hebrew word, if you remember that. So that's why, so when God saw that it wasn't good that Adam was alone, he built the solution to his problem.
Yes.
So that when Cain gets this mark, whatever it is, that was God's solution to his problem. But Cain said, I'm going to go build, same word that God used to say, built Eve, I'm going to go build my solution.
Yes. He did not like God's
punishment
or God's protection, I guess, that he put on him.
So he went and built, and that's why cities start out under a bad connotation in the Bible. Cities, and I think you said that earlier, cities are not a good thing in the Bible.
No, not so far. I mean, we're going to cross a bridge at some point.
Yeah.
But, and that's really not that where you start to see them go in both directions. It's not that far away in the storyline. But the first several cities mentioned in the Bible are not a place where you want to be.
Yeah. And then one final comment.
Sure.
In the Babel story, it tells us that they were able to make bricks. And they brought out in the podcast how huge of an innovation that was. Instead of quarrying stones and building your
Very true.
wall, now they had bricks. So the process was expedited.
I meant to bring that up and forgot. I'm glad you mentioned it, because it was another thing that in a garden, somebody's not coming up with that. There really wasn't probably a need. That was necessity is the mother of invention kind of thing, but somebody figured out. And from those bricks, either the bricks came from pottery or pottery probably came from the bricks. And there were a lot of, I'm going to guess, offshoots of all that technology that was learned.
Yeah.
But and that the technology itself wasn't a bad thing. But again, the use that they wanted to put it all to was maybe the reason they came up with it might not have been the best, or just the use that they put it to. But no, very, very good observation on that. I forgot about mentioning that. I meant to make a note of it and forgot. So we're going to take a jump over to the next chapter, chapter 19. And if Pastor, you would read verses 7 and 8, and then 13 and 14. And then Mike, read 15, 16, and 17.
And I said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. 13.
Yes.
For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But it seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law.
15, 16, and 17.
Okay. And when the morning arose, then the angels hasted Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife, and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters. The Lord began mercifully unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, nor stay thou in all thy plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed.
And you know, I didn't want to read too much of this. There's some things to cover here, but we all know the story pretty well. You know, there's nothing in here that's a real surprise, but you know, in all of this, what happened to Lot? This is the righteous man that was to be saved. The guy that just offered his daughters to these people. This is who Abraham, I mean, I know it was his nephew, and obviously he loved him, but this is the righteous man that Abraham was worried about. Is this the life, do you think, he dreamed of in chapter 13? You know, we all know the story, their herdsmen. It seemed like Abraham and Lot weren't arguing, but their herdsman was, because they had so much stuff, there wasn't enough room for everybody in the same area. And Abraham said, you choose. Now, when he told Lot, you choose, you know, it says that he looked down somewhere. It said, I forget the verse, but he looked, and it looked like the Garden of Eden down there. It was lush, and it was green, and it was just the most fertile land, and that's what it looked like the best, and that's what Lot chose, and he went that way. And Abraham stayed here, and he dreamed of this great life. Obviously, do you think this is where he pictured himself going when he went to the city?
No. Sounds a lot like Eve. It was pleasant to the eyes.
Yes. It just, yeah, you're right. It was like the fruit of the tree. And it looked good, but it was not a good place to be. And, but yeah, he looked up his eyes, and he saw that it says it looked like the garden of the Lord, the land of Sodom and Gomorrah. Obviously, this was before God destroyed it. And just as afar off cities, you know, how did Lot fall so far? Is what he went to this city, and just whatever moral compass he had seemed like it. He set it on top of a magnet or something. I don't know. He just. How did it? You know, did he start making these things? It just seemed okay. In this city, how did this city get so corrupt? You know, I realize you get people around, you have bad neighborhoods, but this wasn't a bad neighborhood. You know, and one of the things that comes to my mind, may or may not have played a part in it, but it was the best looking spot around. What happens when people get it too easy?
Oh, we covered that Wednesday night.
Yeah.
King Asa.
You know, what happens when people get it too easy? And somewhere along the line, look, he started justifying himself. And you think of all the, I mean, what, if I asked today, what do you think the most wicked city in America is?
We'd have quite a choice.
You know, you would, but what do you know, because you think of, you can think of a city in California, San Francisco, to throw one out. Businesses are closing up, they're leaving town, it's lawlessness, they got rid of the police force, they're having to put everything behind lock and key. I mean, you turn on the news, it sounds horrible. Think there's any good Christian people there?
Keep going, Bob. You're setting my sermon up good.
You know?
Keep going.
No, I'm just saying, do you think that there, I'm going to say that there is. There's some good people, but I don't think that there was any good people here.
Well, the ones that were left because that
Yes.
was the deal with Abraham. If there are 40 or 50
Yeah.
righteous, got it all the way down to 5. And there
Did
still
God get
wasn't-
anybody else out?
No.
You know? It just tells us about Lot.
Yeah.
But they, you know, I just don't think this was, you know, because there's cities you can think of where things just sound like they're horrible, but I just don't think they don't compare to this. I think this is beyond what we could really quite imagine as far as feeling safe and all these things. And, you know, one other thing I'm going to cover, I don't know, are any of you guys aware that they believe they found the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah? Mm-hmm. And you know where they're at?
Yeah, it's south by the Red Sea.
The Dead Sea.
Dead Sea, yeah. No,
Yes,
Dead
down
Sea.
by the Dead Sea. So they're also saying, what lives in the Dead Sea? Do you guys know this?
Nothing.
Nothing lives there. That's absolutely correct. This area was laid to waste. So the modern, and this was in the Nature Journal, the Journal Nature. Mm-hmm. Yes, the scientific journal Nature. They're saying that roughly 3,600 years ago, that there was a comet that landed in this area and filled it so full of stuff. When it exploded, it leveled everything around, and it filled the sea with so many minerals, nothing would live there. Nothing grows there. There's nothing there. It puts so much stuff in the ground that nothing will even grow there. And the timeline in the Bible, this is all like, from when they say this happened to when Abraham lived, we're in the same timeline. I found that kind of interesting, but that's something you can Google it. But they're comparing the blast to whatever. But they have found ruins down there, and they're, I mean, this says when Lot looked down there, it looked like the garden of the Lord. Mm-hmm. It was green, it was fertile, it was everything that anybody would look at and say, "Man, I want to go live there." And now the place will not sustain life to this day.
Yeah, it's barren.
He said also around the same time there was a giant earthquake that cut off the water flow.
Could be. Well, maybe the water flow out.
Well,
I don't
it-
know.
it used
Water
to-
flows into the
water
Dead Sea, right?
Used to flow into the Dead Sea, and then an earthquake or something happened around the same time and cut the water flow off.
Yeah, and it's so far below sea level. It's 700 feet below sea level, and it has no exit. So everything drained, and it's on a fault line for they tell you that when you go on the tour. It's on the fault line.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's where we're ending up at today. Bob, would you close?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together. Thank you for Bob's working and looking this up and bringing it to us. And as we think about the cities and what can go wrong and what can go right, Lord, we pray that we would be an influence for good in the cities that we have influence in. We thank you for this time. We pray you be with Pastor as he brings the word this morning. Strengthen him and encourage him as he gives forth the word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Here's that Dead Sea there. Mineral